why the first price you see at a store shapes your spending habits? Or how a single first impression can color your entire judgment? That's the power of anchoring bias, and it's influencing more of your decisions than you ever think. Now let's see a popular example. There certainly are a lot of consumer goods and services that end with 0.99. Ever wonder why? Let's take a look. Suppose the desired price point of a product is 100. That could be 100 rupees or $100 or just about any currency. The reason it is instead listed as 9.99 has to do with the anchoring bias. Because the first number the consumer processes is 9, it instantly creates an impression that is lower than 10. Of course, 9 is lower than 10. So this is not rocket science. However, the real trick is in the numbers that follow, that is 99. Those 99 rupees or 99 cents actually raise the price to be just about 10. So instead of listing the price as 10, the price is listed as 9.99 to create the perception of a lower price. There really is no difference between 9.99 and 10. It just seems that way. So let's dive deep into something that affects each of us daily. You might not even realize it's happening, but it's influencing the choices you make more than you think. Still not convinced? Let's take a closer look. What is anchoring bias? It's a cognitive bias where we rely too heavily on the first piece of information we encounter, the anchor, and use it as a reference for all our future decisions. Even if that anchor is irrelevant or arbitrary, it still continues to influence our thinking process. Anchoring bias was first introduced by psychologists Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman in the early 1970s. In one early study, participants were asked to compute the product of a long list of numbers in a very short amount of time. But there was no time to do the actual calculations. People would base their subsequent guesses on their first few calculations. Their later answers were influenced by whatever those initial anchor points were. The researchers even found that completely arbitrary, unrelated information could act as an anchor for future choices. Oh wait, it's not always negative. Anchoring can help us make decisions quickly. For instance, it can act as a useful reference when we don't have time for lengthy analysis. Anchoring to a fair price point can also guide us in shopping or setting reasonable expectations in various situations. On the flip side, anchoring can lead us to make poor decisions. We might be influenced by irrelevant or faulty information, causing us to overlook better choices. This is especially true when our anchor is based on something arbitrary like a random first impression or outdated data. Let's explore how this cognitive shortcut can influence decisions and perceptions, often without us realizing it. Personal life. Let's see how anchoring bias can influence your purchasing decisions. That's how it can influence how much you're willing to pay. Imagine you're buying a new car. You read online that its average price is 11 lakhs. At the local car lot, the dealer offers you the same vehicle for 10 lakhs and 65,000, which you quickly accept. After all, you might reason 35,000 less than what you were expecting to pay. But the dealer across the town is offering the same vehicle for just 9 lakhs and 65,000. A full 1 lakh less than what you paid and 1 lakh and 35,000 less than the average price you found online. If you buy the more expensive car, you might berate yourself for making such a quick decision without shopping around. So why might you jump so quickly on that first offer? Because your initial research indicated that rupees 11 lakh was the average price that served as an anchor point. Despite further information, such as the possibility that other dealers might have lower prices, you based your decisions on that anchor. Any price lower than that probably would have been appealing. Professional life. Let's see how anchoring bias influences salary negotiations. Imagine that you're discussing the possibility of a pay rise with your employer. They make an initial offer and you negotiate it slightly up from that. Instead of looking at what other employers are paying or what other people in a similar positions in your field are earning, you base your negotiation decisions on that initial number that your employer suggested. Relationships. Let's see how anchoring bias influences your relationships as well. When John met Sarah, he was immediately impressed by her confidence and intelligence. Even though as time went on, he noticed she sometimes lacked empathy or wasn't as emotionally available as he thought. He struggled to break free from that initial impression. Her first confident appearance became an anchor that influenced his entire view of her, leading him to overlook important red flags. Health and lifestyle choices. People use the idiom, "my eyes are bigger than my stomach," when they order too much food at a restaurant or serve themselves more food than they can eat. And when this happens, even if one recognizes the vast amount of food in front of them, they typically end up eating more than they usually would in one sitting. On the other hand, if you're served a relatively small portion of food, you may be able to recognize you're satisfied and you don't need to eat anything else once you finish. The difference in food intake in these two scenarios is likely related to the anchoring bias. To get the anchoring bias to work for you when it comes to determining the portion size of your meal, you can look at the healthy portion sizes to give yourself an anchor that will influence your food intake. Wait times at restaurants. Speaking of eating and restaurants, think of a time that you put your name on a waiting list at a restaurant to get a table after being told it would take about 30 minutes. And then think about how frustrated you started to get when 30 minutes came and went and your name hadn't been called yet. Now think about how you may feel if 35 minutes was approaching and the host had told you it would be a 45-minute wait. In that case, rather than anxiously waiting in frustration, watching the clock and maybe even looking for a good opportunity to complain to the host, you would be starting to get really excited that your wait was almost up. However, in both these scenarios, you would have waited the same amount of time, your anchor just would have been different. Consumer behavior. Mark went shopping for a pair of sneakers and saw a high-end brand priced at Rs 2,000. Immediately after, he found a similar looking pair for Rs 1,200. Even though the Rs 1,200 sneakers were within his budget, he felt like they were a deal because they were cheaper than the anchor, the Rs 2,000 pair. The original high price made the Rs 1,200 pair seem like a better deal than it actually was. Now for a moment, think how these marketing tricks manipulates and plays with our brain. So how can we combat anchoring bias in our own lives? As usual, awareness is the key. The more we recognize when we are anchoring ourselves to something irrelevant, the better we can adjust and make more rational decisions. The result of this is that people live in their own highly biased information bubbles and people become detached from reality, all because they started with an absurd anchor rather than a neutral and curious orientation. Ask yourself, am I making this choice based on solid evidence, or am I just anchored to the first thing I encountered? At the end of the day, anchoring bias is a natural part of how our brains work, but we can learn to navigate it and avoid falling into its trap. Stay curious, stay informed, and remember, don't let the first piece of information you see be the only information that shapes your decisions. Do you still think first impressions matter?